I think I was more interested to see, one, how watching this with people that are no familiarity with Dungeons and Dragons were going to take it.
Mm.
And two, what my understanding of Dungeons and Dragons and the experience of playing it was going to relate to the movie itself. We got a little bit more movie-ish stuff.
Oh boy, more movies.
Yes.
Let's Total Pebble movie critic.
Yes.
The sequel.
Total Pebble Kinetoscope. I wanted to do a little bit of a soapbox just to tell you about a couple movies that I saw recently that are video game related.
You saw Mario.
No, I didn't see the Mario movie.
Okay.
I heard it was okay. I actually have seen both of the Sonic movies. I have, but that wasn't what I was going to talk about today. Would you like me to tell you?
Yes.
Okay, so I saw D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves.
Nice.
And I saw Tetris. That one I talked about before.
Yes, the one we have talked about, and I have also seen the Tetris movie.
You have? Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Crave had put it on, because it was on some streaming service and was doing it, and I actually sat down and watched most of it with her.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Actually, I guess then let's talk a little bit about Tetris to start then, because I have to say that it is probably, for people who are used to the video game adaptation of movies, that is not what Tetris is. It is not, let's play as somebody who has to compete with falling blocks coming into place. This is the...
I would like to preface this with the fact that when you had originally told me about the Tetris movie and chalked it up to a documentary style movie, you were totally wrong.
It's a docu-drama.
Yes, the way you had slated it to me was that it was a documentary type style movie, and I was like, that sounds dumb. And we had said like, it's kind of weird, it doesn't seem like it'll be that great. And I would like to say,
yes,
it was actually a pretty decent movie.
It was not as silly as I thought it was going to be. I think one of the things that helps is that the two main characters were executive producers on this, so at least they knew like what the content was going to be, or they were actively involved in the making of it. But the thing that I thought was very interesting is like, there's a few chase scenes and stuff at the end of the movie if you're looking for some action. But the thing that was very interesting, the amount of business decisions and copyright information that goes into just licensing a game, especially at that time trying to get a game out of the USSR. Right at the time where the USSR, as you can kind of tell when they're toward the end of the movie, is at the very, we're in the waning days, as Gorbachev kind of toward the end is kind of like going, I don't know why they didn't just cast Gorbachev as Gorbachev. That would have been pretty sweet. That would have been great, honestly. That would have been great. If you're ever wondering how business law works, you're gonna love this film. And if you wanted to see a very 80s movie, it is definitely inspired by that. Even in the music and in the presentation of like doing the cutscenes as like the 16-bit like cutscenes or the 8-bit cutscenes and stuff like that.
It's very stylized.
It is very stylized. I think that they did a little too much expo dumping at the very beginning, where he's like talking to the investor and he's basically giving like 90% of the story to him when he's explaining like how we get to this one point, mostly so that they can do the part where he goes to the USSR. One of my favorite parts though was where they have this long back and forth about how they inadvertently like gave away the rights to do the console version because of how they defined what a computer is. Right. which is great. And then they like do the switcheroo. And
they rewrote the contract, made the guy sign it so he didn't have the rights to it anymore because they defined it properly. Right. No, it was an interesting movie. Obviously a lot of like big brain stuff going into it of the like actual like law type stuff in it and contract stuff, but obviously it was Yeah, I think it was pretty decent. It was a very tense movie throughout. It was like, oh shit.
Yeah. When you first hear about it, you're like, I don't see how this is going to be nearly as, dramatic as possible. But boy, they really do make the interpolitical nature of getting a game out of the USSR pretty intense, and there is of course some heightened stylistic things that go along with it, because as you said, it's not a documentary, so it's not just a bunch of talking heads telling you what to think. It's actors portraying the people that were in the thing entirely. I liked how they talked about like Nintendo and Mirrorsoft. Those were fun. And it's like, I didn't even remember Mirrorsoft, which is kind of indicative of what happened toward the end of the movie too with them. And this wonderful confluence of having this very simple puzzle game that they need to license out of a place that doesn't really want any of their intellectual property going outside of the country, and this incoming wave of really the mobile gaming market, where the Game Boy that only like 10 people have ever seen is coming out. And how can we move this obscure game that is having trouble getting outside of the USSR entirely to turn it into the largest game of that generation on a handheld console that didn't even exist as far as most people were even aware. And that's an interesting... I thought that part was really interesting, about going from legitimately this very archaic way of thinking about things to this neo way of looking at things that's future tech, and how the old kind of is crumbling at the same time that this new generation is coming up, and how they tried to transport it around. It was funny because I was watching this with like Mom and Mark and everything, and they obviously didn't know anything about Tetris except that she had played it on the Game Boy.
Before you got the Game Boy.
Yeah, well, I had gotten the Game Boy, and I had gotten it from my Aunt Carmen. I had the original.
Big one, the big brick.
Yep, I had the big brick. And I had gotten from my Aunt Carmen, who gave it to me because she realized... because she was playing Tetris all the time. And it was the thing where she was like, I'm going to give this to you now. And my uncle thanked me, because it was like literally taking up all of her time playing Tetris.
Man, imagine how far video games have come.
I know, right? And so then when I had my Game Boy, Mom would play it when I wasn't around, and she started to see falling bricks in her dreams. So when they do that thing at the very beginning where Hank is like talking about, I see the blocks falling in my brain, she's like, I know the feeling. but no one really understood the absolute intricacies of just how we even got it so that we could experience it ourselves. So, very interesting film. Definitely not what most people might expect when you hear a Tetris movie, or when I try to explain to Alex, apparently, what a Tetris movie is going to be. Sorry. Last night, I also saw Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, which I was very excited to see. I think I was more interested to see, one, how watching this with people that are no familiarity with Dungeons & Dragons were going to take it. And two, what my understanding of Dungeons & Dragons and the experience of playing it was going to relate to the movie itself. The people that I was watching it with that had no frame of reference for Dungeons & Dragons, they thought it was a fun fantasy adventure, so they got something out of it, no problem. For me... one, I like the references to the like, you see a lot of the classic monsters from D&D that show up in this, and you can identify classes. You even get to see, like, the Tabaxi show up at one point, and I think Mom's reaction was, ooh, cute cat people! It's like, yep, that's the reaction you should have when you see the Tabaxi. The Dragonborn show up, the Aarakocra, you get to see some of the neat races that are in Faerun. And they talk about the Harpers in this, and the Red Wizards and stuff.
I don't think anyone who hasn't played D&D is going to have any idea who the Harpers or any of that is.
Well, luckily they tell you. Like, they explain the Harpers, because the lead character used to be one. so they explain that in more detail. I think the thing that I liked about it the most was that if you really look at the party and the campaign that they have to go on to complete their task, it will probably remind a lot of people of what playing D&D feels like. The plot basically revolves around the lead character, and I'm not really spoiling much here because this is something that they talk about before the actual title screen shows up right now for the movie. So this happens in like the first 10 minutes. The lead character had something that happened related to his backstory that led to the death of his wife. There's this token that he's trying to get that would be able to bring somebody back from the dead. And he's trying to steal it with a group of other thieves. And it goes badly, and he and Holga, the barbarian who he's always traveling with, get caught, and the other ones get away. He's in prison for a couple years, and they escape, and they go back onto the quest of trying to find this so that they can resurrect his wife. The path that they take in order to do that ends up being, we've got this magical gate. Well, how are you ever going to take down this gate? Well, there's only one way to do it. You need to get the special helmet. Okay, well, how are we going to get the special helmet? Oh, it's in the Underdark. Now we got to find somebody that's going to get to the Underdark. And as they're explaining it, things go completely wrong, like single step of the way, where the plan has to get sidetracked for this other plan so that we can do this other thing. The puzzles of like trying to get over the bridge gets completely wiped away when one thing goes wrong, and then they have to come up with a brand new solution. Elgin, the main character, basically is kind of like going, okay, so plan A didn't work, so now we're on to plan B. Oh, and we have a plan C in case plan B doesn't work. Terrific. And then there's a part toward the middle where they're kind of like going, okay, so plan B and C and D all failed. Okay, you know what? This is fine. We go back to plan A, but it's plan A2 now.
A2 electric.
Yeah, exactly. It's like plan A, but not the plan A we originally thought we were going to do. And I thought that for the most part, that was very reminiscent of the experience of playing D&D, where it feels like every time you come up with a plan, something goes wrong and you have to come up with a new plan that seems like a worse idea than the previous plan to get there. But it's fun. You get to see mimics and displacer beasts, and you get to see slimes and dragons, obviously, and they go to the Underdark, and there's a lot of Neverwinter is part of it, so
of course, it's all the classic Forgotten Realms.
Exactly. Not a lot of deep diving places, but a lot of the places that people are familiar with.
Well, the Underdark is a deep dive place, but only because it's underground.
It's underground, yeah, exactly. But fun stuff. You get to see many of the classic characters that are represented in the thing. You get to see paladins and barbarians, druids, a sorcerer and a bard are the ones that are part of like the main campaign, and the rogues, obviously. So it's fun, and I think the spirit of it was really good. Chris Pine has the kind of attitude for a bard that makes it worthwhile. And Michelle Rodriguez as a barbarian, that makes sense to me. That's like her training from the Fast and Furious franchise has really prepared her for this. Just over the top, street brawling sort of thing. Makes perfect sense. Lot of good stuff overall, and I think it's a fun enough adventure. If people were looking for like the big epic campaign out of it, I don't think that would translate very well to the 2-hour-long movie.
No.
But as a fun fantasy adventure that is themed and styled with the Forgotten Realms as your setting.
It's kind of like Ocean's 11 meets D&D, I think. It's kind of what that seems more like.
And has a lot of fun nods, especially. There's a part, and people saw it in one of the trailers, but there's a part where they have to go into this maze. They're standing there, the team, and then, like, off to the side is this other team that looks like they have very colorful garb on, and you realize immediately, oh, that's the team from the 80s cartoon. Billy the Barbarian and the kid that's the wizard and all that. They put them in the movie as one of the teams that's trying to get through the maze and win the prize. So I think that if people like D&D, they're probably going to get something out of that. But if you don't know anything about D&D, as several people didn't when they saw this, you're probably going to enjoy it. Because it's got a little something for everybody, as they say. Unfortunately, though, one criticism I can make is not a lot about copyright law.
Yeah. Why would there be anything about that?
Well, I was spoiled after Tetris. I thought I was going to learn something about, video game rights, and I did not get that. I did not get that from this movie. No, I've seen a lot of video game films at this point, and D&D Honor Among Thieves is one of the better ones, frankly, even though it's not video games, so to speak. But I've seen a lot of game-based movies, and yeah, it's in the top 50%, rather than the bottom. And I think Tetris actually is, too. I thought that it was a very interesting take as trying to do a docu-drama off of video games, which you don't always see. So,
right.
But anyway, if anyone is down in the comments and wants to tell me if I am, again, very, very wrong...
Or very right, perhaps.
That's too much to ask.
Damn.
Sorry. Please let us know in the comments down below.